right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Meredith Glasgow, and I am the Vice President of Practice Success here at Dental EMR. Today is our session 2 of our marketing webinar series, and we're delighted to have Corey back here from Hamilton Wise and Associates, as always, to share his expertise with us. In case you missed out on our first session, we actually covered strategies for building your referral relationships in your community, and that's whether you're a new practice just starting out, or maybe you're an established practice looking to grow those referral relationships. If that sounds like something that you'd like to catch up on, don't worry. We're actually going to be including that recording to session 1 along with the recording for today. So you'll get an email after, and we'll just pop both of those in there in case there's anything in that first one that you missed. Otherwise, I think we are good to go. Let's go ahead and dive right in. So for today's session, we are going to start really zeroing in on Google Business Profile. And Corey, I'd love for you to start us out with just telling us kind of why this topic is the natural best, next step for our marketing conversations.
Google Business Profile is one of those aspects of a business that's often missed. Alex and I, we didn't start our business from a profit-driven motive. We started it out of necessity. Because as consultants, when we go into specialty practices, one of the top things that they'd ask is, how do we get more patients in the practice? And when we started looking down the customer journey, the buyer journey, we realized that this step was getting skipped. And so as we started to implement it, it just kind of formulated what we do now, which is based around the customer journey, which we'll go over today. But yeah, it's the place that everybody goes first, where we live in a society that's so driven on reviews and social proof, what other people say. And Google's created an ecosystem where it's the first thing that you see, whether you look up a phone number or you look up directions, or you're trying to find the best thing in a city when you're new and you just want to find a restaurant or a golf course or a hair salon. You go to Google Business Profile and you compare.
Yeah. And I think as consumers, right, in general, I think we can all relate to the fact that if there is a Google Business Profile that exists for something, we're probably going to navigate that first, just really, look and see what the preview of the business looks like, what the ratings are, and get that information quick instead of having to click on a link and dig into a website to get that initial impression right off the bat.
Yeah, that's such a great point. There's so many things that I'll look for if it's in a business complex. I'll go on Google Business Profile and see if I can see outside pictures so I know what I'm looking for when I show up. Inside, I want to know what it's going to look like, what the aesthetics and the staff are like. I'm looking at all these things before I even consider, or as I'm considering visiting. It gives the full introduction and first impression.
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of had a little bit of a gut reaction to that when you said that. It's like I do get a little bit of anxiety personally when I go into a new place. I like to be prepared. I like to know what I'm going to be, kind of seeing and experiencing when I first go in, just to make sure, I'm not coming in from scratch. So that's absolutely true. And we're going to absolutely relate that to endodontics specifically. Obviously, this can be relatable to dentistry, but for endo, that's definitely going to be the case for patients that have any sort of anxieties or want to kind of partially prepare themselves for what to expect coming into, for many patients, an area of unknown when it comes to dental treatment, for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So the different sections that we're going to be talking today, we're going to go through the customer journey for those who missed it. This is going to be on the patient side this time, the customer buyer journey. We're going to go through an introduction to what Google Business Profile is, why Google Business Profile is important. We're going to give some examples so that you can actually see what makes a good versus a one with some areas to improve. We're going to cover how to stand out, and then we're going to have a final Q&A. If anybody here has questions, please, we welcome them. Otherwise, we'll go through some of our own.
Awesome. Sounds great.
So skipping through, for whatever reason, mine just skipped. The customer buyer journey, it's the same. The awareness that a problem exists, consideration to solve those problems, the different options. Then you make a decision, you retain the business, or you find a new solution and you talk about it. As you're going through those, the market research is again in that beginning phase of problems existing. when they go in the consideration, this online reputation is what we're talking about today. People look at, top endodontist or best endodontist near me. Even with a referral, I was talking to a doctor yesterday, and they were saying that they get a lot of clients because the dentist will refer an endodontist. The patient will still go online and do their own research, and they have very high reviews. And a patient will say, "We were referred to, Dr. Smith. We decided to go to you based on the reviews that other people are saying." So people are really making their own decisions, even though it's recommended, even though a different one is recommended. So then they make that decision on their own, and then they retain the advocacy part goes back into if you're asking your patients for reviews, that lends to the easing the process for future patients to come into. So the introduction to Google Business Profile, for whatever reason, I think it's stretched on my screen, but this is just what people see when you land on Google Business Profile. When you type in your name or the practice or best endodontist near me, Google is trying to give you the best answers that they can to solve the problem that you're looking for. For this one, it's a restaurant called Kitchen Sink, but it has all of the different points of information that somebody may want as quickly as possible. It has the address, the hours, the phone numbers, but then it has the reviews. And you'll see there's reviews from other like Facebook or Yelp or like, different spots around the web. But Google's really highlighting the reviews that people leave on their platform first. And then from there, people can click in. This kitchen sink, if you can't see, has 4.5. So for me, immediately, I'd be clicking in on that because it looks like a nice restaurant. I want to find out what makes this a 4.5 and not a 4.9 or a 5.0. And I catch myself thinking, how's the service? How are the prices? How's the speed to get in? How is the food? Does it look pretty? But like all these things are immediately going on in my head before, we've ever actually thought about making a reservation or going in.
Absolutely.
The areas of that Google Business Profile, which we'll dive deeper in on a next webinar, but it covers the business name, the category that it serves, the map information, business hours, it links to the website. You have a brief description of the practice or the business that you can put in, which a little pearl here is a great spot to put in things that people may search for, like a doctor name. We've had issues where the practice itself, the practice name is listed, but if you type in the doctor, which is often what's given on a referral, somebody
Right.
types in Dr. Smith and it's not popping up because it's not in the business description. You have photos, which is an introduction to the practice. You can actually post now, which is another place where you can, for those who hear those SEO buzzwords all the time, the search engine optimization, the keywords that people are searching for, that's a great spot in the posts where you can be putting those words that people are searching. The review section, you can actually have a Q&A section, so you can ask or answer your own. You don't have to wait for somebody else to do it. But ask your staff the questions that you get most often from patients, you can put here and head off those concerns to, again, eliminate any gaps in that customer buyer journey where somebody may fall out and say, I don't know if this is the business for me. You can answer those questions. For the other profiles, the attributes that the business has, like whether or not it's wheelchair accessible, menu and services. Obviously, it goes towards all business profiles, but you can put in the different services that the practice offers, like emergency visits. You can put products, you can put links to your booking site. So if you have a schedule now on your website, you can have that in. Messaging, Google's actually just taking this out. I just read that they're removing this, so messaging will no longer be applicable. But then they have insights, housekeeping, and maintenance. So again, we'll dive deeper into these on a next webinar, but this is the bulk of the information that all goes into Google Business Profile. So it's actually a lot more in depth than
Right. I mean, like who knew And I know even just exploring it with you, Corey, and with Alex, even within the scope of Dental EMR, just trying to figure out what all can be leveraged in a Google Business Profile. I definitely had one of those like, wow, I had no idea moments. But I mean, it's what you would expect, right? Because Google Business Profile really became the dominant source of reputation building for businesses. I'd say within the last decade, right? It hit and it gained popularity pretty quickly and became kind of our go-to for searching for businesses. But it makes sense that they would expand not only the way that consumers perceive businesses for the first time in this profile, but as you mentioned, so much of this plays into the SEO aspect. So if you really are trying to rank higher, incorporating a Q&A section or specific services or things that patients are specifically searching for is going to match you up to their search a lot faster than if they were just to simply search root canal or, something more generic in your area. So yeah, I love all that. And to your point, so we'll mainly dive into reviews today, but we're definitely going to be circling back to some of these other areas as well, because I know for sure if there's anyone like me that's kind of like, what? You can do a Q&A section? It's like we're definitely going to want to dive into that for sure.
Yeah, people seem to overlook it, but the main part, Google's a business, and
Yeah,
Google's business is to find the solutions on the entirety of the interwebs, the vast interwebs, to find the most applicable answers to the questions that people are asking. That's it. So
yeah,
Google has algorithms and all the fancy things that we hear about, but the key part that they're trying to do is match the best answer to the question that people are asking. And this is how they've figured out how to do it is they ask the questions up front. And the more that you can give specific answers, the better it's going to tie to the specific questions that people are going to be asking,
yeah, absolutely.
which is kind of a segue into why Google Business Profile is important. But that's it. It's really giving somebody who's searching for the best auto mechanic the best options that so they don't have to go and make that mistake themselves. They're relying on Google and the people utilizing Google to help them make that best informed decision. So these were just two that we pulled off the internet. One is a business. It's Fine Mobile Mechanics. It looks like a stock photo that Google pulled probably from Google Maps. It's hard to tell what they were going for here, but nobody updated it. So as I look at it and say, I don't know what they're looking at, anybody who's looking for a mechanic is going to see the same thing and have the same question. They have no ratings or reviews. They do have an address, but there's no phone number. There's no link to the website. I don't even have a way to contact them. And if I do, is it going to be some guy just laying on the ground changing my oil? Like it, because they haven't spent the time to bolster their business on this, I'm not going to go to them. So they're just losing business by not putting in the information they already have. This other company, Autotech, it has a 4.9 star rating with 726 reviews. Automatically, it shows that they're busy, that most of the people who go to them have a good experience. As you go through, not only do they show the outside with a little stamp that their family owned and operated. So that's one of those plug areas where they can say a little bit more in multi using that photo. They have pictures of the inside. They have pictures of their staff. They really eliminate any of the questions that I could ask before going in. It shows that they're professional and makes it feel like I'm going to be in good hands. 30 plus years in business. They have all the information that I need to go to their website to find directions to their location. We can call it. It makes it very simple. They've filled out all the different services, which the other company did as well. But um, obviously, they go above and beyond. This little section here is one that you can fill in what areas it serves. This is a great way to focus on different neighborhoods. If the area that you live in has districts or communities, you can put those in. So if somebody's not saying, Bend, if they're saying, in the frontier district or whatever area that they live in, again, Google's going to match that. So these are kind of two examples of businesses. One that it's great. It would be so easy for this other company to just fill that information in and immediately get to a good spot. For me as
My
a consumer, I would immediately go to Autotech though.
Yeah, and I feel like this is kind of an example of just creating a Google business profile doesn't immediately start bringing in customers or patients. This would be where Google business profile could technically be losing you patients, because now it's not just a matter of what does your profile look like and does it demonstrate the ethos of your business and kind of like how you prefer to run your business or be presented in the community. It's also how does yours compare to others in the community? And that's something that you kind of have to think about. There is a little bit of competition in Google business profiles when it comes to making sure that you're one leg up from the competitors in your area. But if you're not able to invest the time to at least put in the bare minimum basics of those kind of the attributes we were talking about before, it can start to lend itself to be a bit problematic for your public reputation, for sure.
Right. And that's why Google Business Profile for us was so important. Again, we had so many people asking, like, should we do these efforts to attract attention? Whether it's external events or whether it's advertising on Google or any of the social media platforms. What should we put more effort into creating brand awareness on, Instagram or TikTok or Facebook? And a lot of the times that the practices didn't have issues with attention, people knew about them. They just had issues here where, and Google has all these as well. You can see the numbers of how many people are viewing your profile versus actually engaging with it or going to the website or asking for directions. So if you're getting high impressions, but you're getting low engagement, oftentimes this was the spot where we found like it's not an attention problem. You have attention, you're just not, people are falling out on the consideration side.
Right.
So that moves us on to some examples. Well, with the examples of the skipping into the review side of things, uh, with the review counts, one of the most important parts that we found in asking for reviews, some of the practices that we work with were of the mindset of like, oh, well, we don't really need reviews or we don't like asking for reviews because, we're mostly referral based. And the challenge there is, again, we've worked with too many practices where the practice itself didn't get a negative review from performances that they did. They got
Mhm.
one from past employees. I think we just had this conversation. Um, Past employees can be a tough one. Angry neighbors, people who tried to call outside of office hours and left a bad review. Like, it's really easy for somebody to vent and then they go to Google Business Profile. So they have their opportunity to vent. And if you have a low review set, then it's really easy for that negative review to knock you down from a 5 star to a 4.5 star very quickly with just one bad review. Whereas if you have like 500 5-star reviews or even 100 5-star reviews, it's a lot less likely to impact that negative review or have the negative review impact your overall score.
Yeah. And the difference is huge. I mean, as you can see there, if you just have 10, you drop 0.3 with just one star review. And it takes a long time to get back at that point. You mentioned 10 to 25-star reviews to get back up a tenth. So they need anywhere from 30 to 60 just to get back up to where they were prior to that one-star review. I mean, it definitely feels like a much higher mountain to climb when you have just that one. And I think that's so important that you emphasize that it could be kind of non-patients that come in
Mhm.
and leave these reviews, because I think the general idea is that we provide the best possible care that we can. Not every patient is going to be a good fit. I like to say good fit because that's really what it is, right? Sometimes we just are kind of how we are able to provide care doesn't always match patient expectations. And as hard as we try to educate patients of what to expect and, the kind of care they're going to receive, there are so many other factors that play into how we jive with patients and whether or not we're a good fit. So I think as providers, we tend to focus on, well, as long as I just provide the best possible care, I can always protect myself from negative reviews. But there will be a patient that comes in that just is not a good fit. You won't be able to
Right.
meet their expectations no matter what you do. And then there are other scenarios where you have non-patients, like you mentioned, or other, kind of neighbors, competitors. You might have, you had mentioned ex-employees. That's another one. Um, it doesn't take a lot. And unfortunately, it's not very difficult for you to get onto Google Business Profile, create a fake account, and go in and write slanderous reviews. There are some strategies, which I know, Corey, you're going to cover, which are great, how to combat those. But, one that comes to mind is I remember personally having a patient schedule. This is when I worked in general dentistry, and she came to the front, our front desk reception, and already was having a fight with our front desk lady at the time about not wanting to get additional x-rays taken. And her x-rays were out of date, and we couldn't provide a proper diagnosis without updated x-rays. She never made it past reception. She never met our doctor. She never officially came in and had a clinical chart of any sort. However, she did manage to create, I think it was like 3 to 5 Google accounts, and created a review for each one of those accounts. And it was just like this onslaught of reviews coming in that we were trying to combat. It's hard. It's very hard to avoid that. And
Yep.
I think that's my point, is like, we can try as hard as we can to avoid it, but they are inevitable. So how do we build that safety net so
Yep.
that way when they come in, they're not as detrimental?
Yeah, and that's the tough part. We had a practice that I had a long relationship with him from 2 companies prior. He's a phenomenal person. He's a phenomenal specialist. He's gone out of his way to go to patients' houses when they needed care. He's very, very focused on creating the best possible outcomes that he can. And this is exactly what happened to him. He had about 40 some odd 5-star reviews, and then we don't know exactly who it was, but it was obviously somebody, a competitor in the area, because they created 4 different accounts. Each account had the same name. I know that one was an alley, but spelled the same. All the accounts were double named with these kind of odd names. Each account was created at the same time, and he got a 1-star review, and a local general dentist got a 1-star review, all in one. And that took him down to a 4.4. And so I said, no problem. This will be easy to take care of. And I contacted Google and said, hey, I've been through your policies. This is where it does not meet this is where it does meet your terms to remove the review. And after months of, I would say, deliberating, but fighting with them, they said, we cannot verify that this is not a patient, even though that there's no record on the doctor side. We don't know that. And even though they didn't actually leave a review, it's just a star, no comment, we can't verify, so we will not remove it. And I tried everything, including threatening to bring it to our lawyers. And they said, have fun. It's staying up. And to this day, it's still there. But what we did do is we got that practice up to, now they're at 200 and mid 200s, and they're at a 4.8. And those, it's just bolstered. So now when they do get a negative review in, which he did just have, we thought we were just about to get him to a 4.9, and he had somebody who had an issue with the scheduling, and they weren't able to work it out. That the patient wanted kind of some exceptions made for him. They couldn't fit him in their expectations, and so the guy left a scathing review. And the same, we're not able to take it down, but we were able to respond kindly and say we're happy to address the issue, which I know you'll talk about on this too, on how to respond to those.
Yeah.
And we had the
It's
doctor make a
hard.
phone call and apologize, and
Yeah.
hopefully,
And to your point, there are some that you can have taken down, right? And there's others that you can't. I know
Mhm.
I worked with a practice recently that had ex-employees that all kind of band together and created a ton of reviews. Fortunately, they used their own accounts. It was very apparent who it was. And with the lawyer's cease and desist, they were able to get them, like the actual users themselves, remove the reviews off of the Google profile, that's great if you're able to do that. But, the long and short of it is it is hard. Once they're on there, it's very hard to either get them to kind of blend in with your average score versus, getting them taken off if they're not a legitimate score. So no one is immune to bad reviews, unfortunately, no matter how good your intentions are. So yeah, you
Yeah.
definitely gotta bolster up any sort of protective measures you can, so that way your average is still where it needs to be. That's really the
Yeah.
important part. Yeah.
In nearly a decade of doing this, we've yet to have Google take down a review.
Yeah.
So they're very stringent on, the bullying or discrimination, but they also say that you can't use somebody's direct name, and we've flagged those and Google will not take them down.
So
So,
crazy. So crazy. Yeah.
but it's also so easy to protect yourself against those in how you respond, but then two, in just asking for those reviews and getting those reviews up. Again, looking at that auto tech example from before, they've got 729 reviews. That tells me that a lot of people like them. There's so
Yeah.
many reasons why to get those reviews up.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
so how to stand out? I think we're right in that window. What can you do to have your Google business profile stand out? At the end of this, anybody who's signed up and attended, we will send out a Google Business Profile Optimization checklist. And it's just really all the things that we discussed in this call that you can go through and just literally check off. Like, do we have accurate photos of the website or of the practice and the staff? Does it give a good first impression of what somebody can expect? Do we have too many photos of things that are irrelevant or potentially skewing from that first impression that we're trying to portray? A lot of times we've the same practices or businesses go the other way, and they have all these different photos of, a St. Patrick's Day party that they did, or something that's not, like, it may be cute at the time, but it's not relevant. So really being specific and intentional with what you're putting on there, making sure that you have all of the information correct, the phone number, making it very, very easy for somebody to contact. It's a whole checklist that you can go through, but that's step one, so that if there's anything that you're not completely confident on, we've got you covered. You can just go down yourself and make sure that all of those areas are complete. um, and then that goes towards the SEO side too. So if you are using a marketing company that manages your SEO, make sure that you're asking them, hey, have you done this for us? Have you gone through, do you know what a Google business optimization checklist is? Hopefully they do. But have you done that for us? Are all these areas filled out? If you're paying somebody for that and you notice that those areas are not there, kind of a red flag to start asking more questions. Um, One of the things that is a little controversial on efficacy is the automated review retrieval system. It's something that we've used and we really like. It's specifically programs like Weave can be really great. Anytime a patient comes in, it can send out an automated request after that can be tailored to your approach. And again, I love the way that you phrase your asks for reviews. So the last one and this one kind of ties together. So I'll kind of skip that for a second. Respond genuinely to every review. That's so, so important. If it's positive, thank you so much. We appreciate your business. Love to see you again soon. Like, thank you. And if it's negative, we take this very seriously and we're sorry for the experience that you had. We're looking into it. Please call the front desk so we can sort this immediately, or we have already emailed or called you to resolve this. Then that
Mhm.
way it shows anybody who's looking through and sees that negative review that you're on top of it immediately and that they're not going to have the same experience that that person did. So it's almost a win, because even if somebody else had a bad experience, it removes the doubt that you may have the same negative experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And that is really important. I think our gut instinct is to protect our team, protect our company, protect ourselves. And I've been there. I've gotten a review
uh,
before where I was just like, grab your phone first. But the idea is that if you can really come back, and I hate to say and be kind of not emotional about it, but if you can be very candid and positive about it and show that you care,
Yes.
Like you said, Corey, it doesn't necessarily mean that a positive outcome is going to come of this. It may be that patient is not willing to do anything, but for mere
Yep.
public perception, there was a negative review and you addressed it immediately. You
Yep.
addressed it with attention, with care. You gave it priority. And whether or not that's saying, call our front desk and ask for Marcia, or, we've already let our office manager know of this. She's going to be in contact with you, those kinds of things. Giving it priority and saying, not only do we care about this, but we have someone like specifically assigned to making this right for you or discussing this further with you really goes one step further to show what your business ethos is and really what you're trying to do for patients across the board, regardless of whether or not they have positive or negative experiences. Yeah, I think that's really
Absolutely. Yeah.
important.
And
Yeah.
it's certainly not a spot where I do not recommend getting into the details of it, especially if they were wrong. That's not the opportunity to call somebody out and explain your side of the story. It just simply we apologize for your experience. This is not our standard, and we would like to resolve it immediately. Like, we are here to take care of you,
Yeah.
and we are in the process of doing so. Done.
Well, and we've even talked about too, like if you have those, I mean, really, your reviews are a space for patients to
Yeah.
provide their experience, right? I mean, yes, technically, a neighbor can come in and say, "Oh, I can tell it for Dr. Smith. He's a fantastic guy," but they're not really speaking on behalf of the services that you're providing, right? So it's like
Right.
most of the time it's going to be patients that are cycling through your reviews. And it's important that if you do get a review that is not a patient, if it feels kind of slanderous or it's not necessarily someone who you can match up with an actual appointment or, any sort of situation that's happened in your office, you could gently say, "I'm sorry, but we don't recognize you as a patient of record. Please call our office so that way we can address this." And that in its own really kind of delegitimizes the actual review itself, right? Because then it's like, oh, is this person like, are they reporting on the wrong account? Like, are they actually a patient? What's going on here? It actually makes the person that is perceiving your Google business profile start to question the review and not your business in that case. So obviously you want to be careful not to try and identify any, particular patients unnecessarily, but it's always good to be able to say, we're not really sure who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Can you please contact us so we can possibly find a resolution for this? Yeah.
Yeah, Alex, the better part of Hamilton Wise, he and I, that's one of the services that we offer. We manage Google Business Profiles for practices, and that's exactly what we do for reviews that we appear unsolicited, that are not genuine, because they
Yeah.
come up and they will happen. But that's the approach that we came up with, is simply stating exactly what you said. We don't recognize you as a patient of record. Please give us a call, and we're eager to sort this out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It is kind
but
of
it
it is kind of funny to call it out like that. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah, a
like you
lot of
said.
people get really nervous, like, oh, I just got a bad review, like it's gonna ruin everything. But it's not. It's again an opportunity to show the character and the integrity of the practice. And so if it's a
Right.
fake review, you can call it out and say, hey, we don't recognize you. If it's a legitimate review, you can call it out and say, hey, we apologize for whatever happened. We'll take care of it. But it ends up building trust and building that authority with potential patients who could read through those reviews, because oftentimes there's so many others that are just glowing.
Yeah.
But if somebody reads a negative and then sees a very stand up response, it shows the practice in a almost higher light than if it was just all perfect.
Yeah.
um, yeah.
I
Well,
love
this
it.
goes into the second. So my take is, we appreciate automated reviews. The upside is that it doesn't take a lot of effort. You don't have to remember it. It doesn't take that direct patient interaction where you say, like, you have to hold out a QR code and say, you got to scan it right now.
Mhm.
And we've seen really good success in asking those. We see huge bumps every time one of those automated, or as those automated requests go out, especially if it's tailored and to the practice's voice and it's a sincere ask. The downside, which we're leaning into, is it doesn't leave the option to kind of segment if whether or not somebody's had a positive or negative experience. It's just a blanket ask. So your approach is
Oh, well, and to be fair, I've done both, right? I've
yeah.
done automated and general dentistry before, and I remember having it fully set up. This is back when we were working through Dentrix and Lighthouse at the time, and everything was automated. Um, and it was running all the time. If we completed a patient appointment, it would send it out automatically. And we were getting consistent reviews. I wouldn't say that it was just the number was just crazy,
Mhm.
but we were getting consistent reviews, and
Yeah.
consistency is key. We're going to talk about that. But if there was ever a time where we had a sense that a patient appointment wasn't going as expected, or maybe we weren't a good fit, or couldn't do what that patient expected us to do right in that moment, there would always be a moment when the doctor that I worked with would come running up to the front, or he'd call me on my extension and be like, "Did you turn off that automation?" And I'm like, "Yes, I already turned it off." So it's like a turn off or turn on for everyone type situation, right? You have to be aware of that. So to Corey's point, if you create automations, you just need to be prepared that if it's sending it to everyone, it's sending it to everyone, right? It's
Yeah.
creating a public platform for just anybody to ask for reviews. If you are trying to set it up where you have consistency and you struggle getting your team motivated to personally ask for them, automation is a great option to get started. But it is
Yeah.
important to kind of weigh the pros and cons, right?
Absolutely.
Well, one method that we do in dental EMR is that it is on a per patient basis, for example. And you may be able to do this with the Weave, I'm not familiar, but we actually have two call to actions in a review request. So the main call to action is to send the patient straight to the Google business profile to leave us a review. And then the second call to action is if we did not meet your expectations, which gives them a private platform to actually provide any sort of feedback or concerns that they have to the practice. And that's something that we collect internally in dental EMR. The admin are notified and they can communicate and chat back and forth with that patient. What we've found is that simply by having that second call to action, which is unusual, usually you don't want two call to actions, right? You just want one. But by giving a specific space for someone who feels like not quite, maybe they're on the edge of like, I just feel like they missed it somehow, like something's missing here, it gives them a space to feel heard.
Yeah.
And in many cases where patients have used that internal feedback form and it's come back to admin, they've been able to reconcile or make, the actual scenario a more positive one, where now the patient is poised to leave a positive review on Google because they felt that they were heard, they were cared for, and they were able to turn that around and say, you know what, now that we've kind of talked about this, would you mind sharing your experience? Because nothing's ever going to be perfect in dentistry or endo, nothing, regardless of how good your intentions are. But we can always try our best to hear patients out, really focus on what their concerns and needs are, and do our best to meet them halfway. We can't always do that. But in the cases that we can, that really provides a great springboard for them to then leave a good business, Google business review at that point. But either way is great. You mentioned efficacy, Corey, and I think you were kind of hinting to the verbal recognition of a review. Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, we've talked about this before, and that really comes down to you can send as many automated review requests as you want, and it's just like a sales numbers game, right?
Yep.
If you make 300 cold calls, chances are you're going to talk to 5 people or whatever those numbers are, right? It's a numbers
Very
game.
accurate.
So yeah, I hope it's not the number, but if you continually send out review requests, you are going to consistently get reviews coming in. But most studies show that if you are able to actually ask a patient for a review, they're more likely to look for it in their inbox and they're more likely to fill it out. I think as patients, we've all experienced getting some sort of a review request via text or email from a practice, and maybe we weren't super motivated to fill it out. We just ignored it. But had we talked to someone upon checkout or talked to the practitioner and they had said, Your experience is not unique. There are a lot of patients that are nervous. There are a lot of patients that have these concerns. We would love for you to share your experience online so other patients can have a feel of how we handle those scenarios and take care of patients here. Is that something you're willing to do? Okay, well, now I'm invested. Am I going to say no? Probably not. Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll leave a review. So now I'm invested as a patient in this conversation. So if they send me a review, I am more likely to fill it out. And I think
So
that probably lends us to maybe our next slide, which we'll get to in a little bit of like, how do we start that conversation? But it's definitely been proven if you can ask your patients for it verbally, they are more likely to fill it out for sure.
yeah, and I love the way that that's framed. So often that's the reserve that somebody has is that, well, it feels like I'm asking for something. It feels awkward for them to give me praise. I don't really feel comfortable going up and saying, hey, here's a QR code. Can you give me a Google review?
Right.
And that should feel awkward because it's awkward. Like, don't do that. But if you go up and say genuinely, like your opinion matters, and a lot of other people are experiencing the same concerns, the same things that you are, and we'd love to just have your honest opinion. You're not asking for a 5-star review, and you're not offering a $5 Starbucks gift card in exchange for a positive review, which feels like a solicited transaction.
Right.
Just saying we want your honest feedback to help others. It's not for me, it's for the community. And that
Absolutely.
really is what ends up happening, because as people are going through, as somebody who's looking to potentially utilize a business, I'm looking at other people's experiences to base if mine's going to be similar or not.
Well, and those are the patients you want leaving you a review.
Yes.
If you feel like you've kind of built up a really positive rapport with the patient and you have a connection with them, it may or may not be similar to other patients, or it may be so good that you just feel like this is just a patient I really jive with. Those are the patients you want leaving you reviews. Now
Yep.
you can automate and just send to literally everyone who walks in the door, and that's perfectly fine. But if you want those quality reviews coming in consistently, you can curate them. You absolutely can. It's just a matter of getting comfortable of where you can kind of insert that request and how you can turn it around from now it's not a request to like, we need to hear from you. Like other people need to hear from
Right.
instead of, give me glowing reviews online so I can build my reputation and do more business kind of thing.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's a great segue on in that ask, beginning it with, how was your experience today? How did everything go? If somebody had a great experience, that's an easy next into, we'd love to hear about it. Other people would too. But it's
Yeah.
also an opportunity if somebody had an issue with, the scheduling or the music or whatever, that the parking, they're going to bring it to your attention first. Most people, so outside of the review space, most people will not go online to leave a negative review. They'll just take it home quietly and
Mhm.
either discuss it with their friends and family or try to figure out a way to not utilize to find a different option the next time. And you'll never know. So these negative reviews, if they do come up, can be an opportunity to learn about how people are feeling about the practice. And preferably, you can bypass the review and just ask them directly, and they'll tell you. But then you can skip all the kind of the backlash and having to go on your heels to resolve an issue after it's become a problem. You can just solve it up front.
Well, and those are questions we're asking, right? We even
Yeah.
talked about this isn't necessarily something that has to be done by the staff. This could be done like the front staff. This could be done by clinical staff. This
Of
could be done by
course.
the doctor. We're already checking in with the patient. Like how many, if you can imagine finishing up treatment, how many of us have finished treatment and said, how are you feeling? Are
Yeah.
you still doing okay? Are you doing all right? Okay, we're going to sit you up slowly, and like you're already checking in with your patients to make sure that everything is okay. That's a great opportunity to be able to say, how was that? Was that better than you expected? Was it worse? How was it? Especially if a patient's coming in and the first thing they're heading off is, I'm just really nervous. I've got the shakes. My heart is racing a little bit. I'm really nervous about this treatment. Dentistry in general gives me anxiety. That's your lead in.
Yeah.
Because if you can help them be as comfortable as possible in that process and you get to the end of treatment and it was better than they expected because maybe you walk them through it as you were doing it, or maybe you were constantly talking to them to make sure that they knew what was coming next, and they had a feel of how it was going. If ultimately they have a better experience than they initially expected, that's your lead in, and you're already asking them about it. It's just kind of changing those questions just slightly. Instead of just saying, how are you doing, how are you feeling, was that like you expected? Was that better or worse than you expected? Because that really does, I mean, they're going to come back and be like, man, that I did not expect it to be that easy. The dental dam in my mouth, I could have gone without that, but that's going to be everybody. But if they feel comforted, despite the fact that a root canal or an apico can be a scary procedure, that's your lead in.
Yep.
And be like, you know what? Your feelings are valid. Your being nervous about this whole procedure is absolutely valid. We may see it all the time as dental professionals, but this is a scary procedure for most patients. So when we're looking at, patients coming in, they have all the same questions and anxieties that you do. Would you be willing to, tell other patients about your experience on our Google business profile? So that way, if they have questions, they can see they're nervous just like you are, but the outcome was better than they could expect. So that really helps us out a great deal. And that's asking for a review. That's
Yep.
it. You're not
When a
saying
pro-
give me a 5-star.
yep.
You're just saying, you tell me about your experience. Yeah.
One pro tip there for competitive research, you can look at other practices in your area and see what negative reviews other people are talking about there, and just see if there's any opportunities. If somebody else isn't doing something, again, most people are going to be in that same camp of feeling the same way. And you can
Right.
kind of get ahead and see what other practices are failing at, and you can ensure that either you're implementing it yourself or use that in your Q&A of whether the website or the Google Business Profile to kind of head those off. Uh, just get ahead a little bit to make
Yeah.
sure that you're giving the best patient experience that you can.
I mean, even learning from your own Google reviews, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're building them up, what a fantastic team building opportunity to be able to highlight,
Hmm.
if they're name dropping specific team members in your practice that are doing a stellar job, bring that up in your huddles. Like, have these conversations. If you're getting 10 consecutive 5-star reviews in a row, read them out loud in your team huddles. Like, your team needs to know. Not everyone has transparency to what your Google business reviews are coming in as. Your admin probably do. They're probably getting notified about it, but not everyone does. And it's a great opportunity to boost morale in your practice. So that way, everyone feels like they're doing a good job. And then on the flip side of that is, if there is a specific instance where you do have a review where maybe there's some negative experiences that the patient is expressing, involve your team. It's
Yep.
highly possible your team might have some really clever solutions for how to get it done. I mean, this is what we talk about in just overall dental practice management. If you aren't aware of a problem as a business owner, or you're aware of the problem and you're not sure how to solve it, ask your team.
Yep.
Because most of the times they have a pretty clear idea of what's causing the problem, where the bog down is, and then, kind of what they would ideally want to happen in order to make that better. In most cases, they absolutely do. So same thing with reviews. Especially if you see something consistently coming in, right? We had talked about a practice in particular had a scheduling issue where they could
Yep.
not keep up with the phone capacity, making sure everyone who called in was able to get to an actual person. That's a problem, but it's a solvable one. And at
And
least
on
we know it is, because without that, it's kind of hard to know, right?
Yeah, and on their side, they couldn't see it. They didn't know it was happening, at least not to the extent it was, because they're inside the practice. And
Yeah.
so once it got flagged pretty quickly or brought to light, but that was the consistent issue, the pain point, that the only negative reviews that people had were saying it's a struggle to get a hold of this practice. Now it's something that, when brought to attention, they were like, we had no idea it was this bad. It's like,
Right.
well, how
Yeah.
many thousands of dollars, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands has this lost you because people are trying to come in and can't?
Yeah. And it's so funny. I know we're going to circle back to this later when we talk about more of the attributes of Google Business Profile, but you mentioned questions and answers. That section in Google Business Profile and your go-to was ask the staff. You're so right, because if you want to know what frequently asked questions are coming through from patients,
Yep.
it's in those initial phone calls.
Yep.
And your staff know what questions they're answering over and over and over again. So being able to head that off ahead of time, they're going to have a pretty good sense of what those questions are and how you can head them off for patients, for sure.
Yeah. And if people are asking staff, they're Googling it too. They're asking the
Yeah.
question.
Yep. Absolutely.
As we get close to the end of this, we have our Q&A section. We'd love to answer any of the direct questions that anybody here has. If
We've
not, we do.
definitely, yeah, we don't have any questions coming through yet. I know we've collected some because Corey, you and I get, it seems in this area, we get a lot of questions even with our own clients right now. So we've got some of those to fall back on if we need to. I still don't see any questions coming through yet. If anyone wants to drop any questions in, feel free. And then of course, if you're coming back and watching this recording still, and there are questions we have not addressed, be sure to respond to our recording email, and we'll make sure that either we circle back to them in our session 3 or we get with you personally to make sure that that is answered. In all actuality, if you have a question, it's probably a question that many other doctors have. So ask away.
I love that
Awesome.
line. I try to always remember it of always try to be the dumbest person in the room. And it sounds a little harsh, but at the same time, I've found so many instances where I haven't asked a question and finally somebody does. And I was like, I've been thinking that this entire time.
Right. I
But
know.
so many people value from it.
I know. I love it. It looks like we've actually, I mean, we may have unintentionally answered the first one a little bit just in our conversation, but that is something that we get asked a lot, right? Whether or not you can remove negative reviews. I think in theory, you're supposed to be able to, right? Because the Google Business Profile has guidelines specifically for it. But as we found out, those scenarios are very specific. And even still, not only is the process difficult to remove them, but it's not always possible. Yeah.
The best way that we found to do that one is to address the patient's problem as quickly as possible in a comment,
Yep.
and then follow up with the patient and hear through their concerns, and then later, and be sure it doesn't kind of step on the toe of your intention, but ask them, like, do you feel that the problem is now resolved? If so, would you be willing to amend the review that you left, or
Yeah.
update the review that you left, and leave it on them? But that's the best way that we found.
And I think it's important that this is handled by upper level management. It either
Yes.
needs to be the doctor directly involved, the owner, or an office manager who handles this. And that's not to say that anyone else in your team is not capable, but it emphasizes that this has been escalated. And I
Yes.
think anytime something's been escalated, we feel like it's been prioritized as a consumer. So that's definitely something that I would recommend if you do get to that point and you want to try and try to reconcile any sort of negative experience that a patient has had. It's better if an upper level management handles that conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How do you stay on top of managing your Google Business Profile? So with this one, whoever owns the Google Business Profile, you can add more people to that ownership, but you can get notifications, whether it's through email. We personally get on all of the practices that we manage, and we get emails anytime there's any review that comes in.
Yeah.
And so how do you stay on top? First, go through the optimization checklist, make sure that the profile itself is full and complete. Then you don't have to worry about that one again. And then as far as managing reviews, have somebody who's dedicated to that, one person, or typically one person who's responsible for managing. And that's managing all responses, whether positive or negative. But as soon as those come in, within 24 hours, just have a prompt response that goes out. But that's the easiest way that we found, whether you hire somebody or have somebody on staff, have somebody dedicated to receiving those emails so that every time that something comes in, you'll be on top of it.
Yeah, unfortunately with Google Business Profile, if you are the administrator, I mean you have to go in there to look at it, but I feel like it does a pretty good job of kind of walking you through these might be some areas you're not taking advantage of.
Yeah, it
Um,
does.
even I mean, I knew that they were there, and I still, this is why I love that we're going to circle back to this in session 3, because it's still important to know why each attribute within like I say attribute, I know that's one portion of it, but
Actually.
each area of Google Business Profile that you can leverage have their own strategy behind them. So we're going to dig into that even further in session 3, but it still does a good job of saying like, hey, you haven't provided any photos. Like you need to do that. You know what I mean? And like you said, by default, Google's going to give you some weird street view automatically, right? So
Hmm.
unless you just want it to be your street view and you just have this spectacular street view where the car managed to capture you in the best light driving by, then chances are you're probably going to want to add in your own photos, and it will, to some degree, it'll kind of walk you through the elements that you might be missing, at least in those elements you absolutely want to include. Things like posts and Q&As are, I feel like those are supplemental that help so much. But at the very least, you want like the basics, like your photos and your operating hours, your services, how to contact you, things like that. And it'll walk you through it pretty
Yeah.
easily.
You'd even
Yeah.
ask, you get emails with, are you open on Thanksgiving? Is this
Yes.
holiday affecting? And you can make sure those are up to date, because that's an easy way to get somebody real upset real quick. If it says you're open and Google said,
Tell me about it. Okay, so I had a similar experience with Sherwin-Williams. I am painting my whole house again for the 15th time. And I went out the day before 4th of July. My local area said that they were open until 4. I went at 1, and there was a sign on the door that said, "We decided to close early," and I was not happy.
we
I
just went
wasn't so
to
unhappy to leave a bad review, but I was not happy because it
we
definitely
just
did
did
not match
this.
my holiday hours. Yeah.
We put so much trust in this. We just went to a new restaurant and we were going to meet friends there, and we rolled up and it said it opened at 4:30. We were there at 6 because we eat early, and it was closed, and no signage, no notice, no nothing. We couldn't get anybody on the phone. It's
So
And
frustrating.
the immediate response, my wife usually just leaves positive responses, but she was like, I'm going to leave a negative review. And she didn't, but it was frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
would definitely let them know once I went back the following week. Finally got my
yes,
paint. I let them know. But yeah, I don't know if that was a franchisee, decision, or if the people that were just manning the Sherwin-Williams location decided that they wanted to just close early. But yeah, I definitely let them know. But it is frustrating because that is your go-to, and the same goes for we talk about this is local, right? So you're trying to get a sense for your schedule and whether or not you can go to an endodontist for an appointment. That matters. They're going to be looking to see if you have availability when they're off work, or when they can squeeze in to come into your office, right? So it is very important that you keep those hours up to date. And to Corey's point, if you will get notifications saying like Thanksgiving's coming up,
yep,
Christmas is coming up. Are you open Christmas Eve? You're probably close to Christmas, but are you open Christmas Eve? If you're taking any emergency patients, that's an opportunity to be able to mark, when your hours are, and it will prompt you as those holidays come up, because we're not thinking about it. We're
right,
thinking, of course, we're closed on Christmas, of course. But when you look at your standard holiday hours, if Christmas falls on a normal operating day, they're going to ask you, do you want us to keep this the same, or do you want us to make an exception and mark that you're closed for the day? So it's
right.
important to keep up with those for sure. Yeah.
Well, speaking of hours, as we get to the close of ours, I think everything in the black. How do I implement strategies outside of automation? We've talked about how do I set up Q&A and posts on Google Business Profile. We can talk about that more next time. Should I only ask for reviews when I know the patient had a good experience? We've talked about how do I motivate my staff to ask for reviews. I think we can talk about that next time too. But I think Meredith, you covered it with just celebrating. If it's negative, not implementing fear, but this using it as a learning opportunity, and when positive reviews come in, using it to bolster the morale and the team culture.
I mean, you
But
can
what
definitely incentivize your team if you want.
and you can incentivize.
If you want to build in bonuses, you can. The thing about reviews is that they are quantifiable. You can
Hmm.
absolutely go in and indicate that as a team, you want to reach a total of 20 reviews by the end of the month. And if everyone's cranking on them and asking patients and really trying to get those efforts up. If you meet the goal, then maybe there's, a financial incentive that you give them, or maybe, you guys go and do an activity for the afternoon. Get a feel. I mean, you have a feel for your team of what they
Yeah.
what they care about, but that's the thing about reviews. I get questions all the time in general about how to motivate teams. And sometimes it's hard to create incentive opportunities for teams if you can't quantify the goal.
Right.
Here, it's very easy to do. You know exactly what your goal is. You know whether or not you're achieving it with notifications. So you could absolutely do that if you wanted to.
We're at the hour, but I think these last two are important, so I'm good to stay on for a few more minutes if you are.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Should I just have one Google Business profile or separate profiles for all my locations? That is a great question, and the easy answer is each location needs its own profile. The website, one specific website with all locations listed. Don't do multiple websites, do multiple Google Business profiles. They can all link to the same website, but all your locations have a different address. They have a different interior. They have different contact numbers. If somebody just types in, and I'm sure we've both had this, but you try to find one location, it gives you the address for another one. You go there, you realize it's the wrong one. It's frustrating. It's so easily avoidable. Each one can have its own Google Business profile. It needs to. Each one can have its own review. It needs to have its own review section. So each one now is responsible for managing all of those individual patients. But yes, you need to have a Google Business profile dedicated to each location that you have.
Yeah.
That one's non-negotiable.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest with you, it's not even one that I thought about. And so many of our endodontists have multiple locations,
Yeah.
whether to your point, whether they share the same. I mean, some of them are named different practices, so they have different
Mhm.
websites. So I guess I would have thought, duh, automatically, of course, you have to, Google business profiles for that. But you're absolutely right. If they're all named the same thing, they just have different locations. If you're searching endodontist near me, that matters because you may not
Yeah.
want to go to a location that's 40 miles away versus one that's 15 miles away. You definitely want
Yep.
to have that profile separate. Yeah, that's awesome.
And this goes back to the question of how do you stay on top of managing your Google Business profiles? Somebody, whether it's one or multiple people or a company that you pay for, you need to have somebody directly managing each location.
Yeah,
It's each one is its own. Well, it's from the financials. Each one is its own separate business, bringing in its own separate revenue. It needs its own separate attention in regard to its patient base.
yeah,
And the last one that we got here is how do I remove existing profiles that are not applicable? So one of the things that Google will do is if it thinks that through scanning all the websites and all the information out there, if it thinks that there is a business that operates that does not have a Google Business profile created for it, we see this a lot with individual doctors, it will create a Google Business profile for that business. And so sometimes we will see, again, using Dr. Smith will have a profile with the address and everything. It auto populates all that information, but then you have the practice name as well. So you've got two Google Business profiles that are similar for the same location and they kind of stack on top of one another. But then everything gets split off in like it'll get both both profiles will get reviews and it gets again convoluted and confusing. People just get lost. We have such a short attention span and we don't love doing the research ourselves. So in that instance, it's just increasing the opportunity for that door and the consideration to fall out to something that's easier to move towards. So if you have multiple Google business profiles that aren't applicable, or if you had a practice that moved or closed, all you have to do is and we can show this next time when we're actually showing stuff, but you can click edit, whether you're in the admin section or not, you can click edit. And when you click edit, you have the option to say this business is, and then there's a series of options. This is a duplicate, is no longer operating. There's a list of things that you can select from, but you can click that you can edit the change and have that removed or added to the one that it's supposed to be. So if there's
awesome.
multiples, get rid of the ones that
Yeah,
that
again, That's something that I haven't thought of, but I've experienced it. I've
Mhm.
definitely experienced it. If I had to look at new practices that start with us, if I do a quick search, I do on occasion find the profile for the doctor separate. And
Yes.
I've always wondered whether or not that was simply because in the beginning, perhaps they had a different name. Maybe their namesake of their company was the actual doctor's name, and then they changed it to a doing business as at that
Mhm.
point. But that makes sense that Google would kind of crawl that information and maybe present a Google business profile that's not actually the primary one. Now, technically, you could keep both if you wanted, but if you're going to keep them both up, you need to keep them both up, right? Or is it better just to have one in that sense? Because I can picture we talked about whether or not they're searching the practice name or the doctor. Is it better to keep both up if you're willing to manage them, or do you still want to unify that as much as possible?
It's not better to keep both simply because it becomes confusing. As you just said, when you're trying to find a new practice, you see two, you're not sure which one to go to.
Right,
If you're a patient just looking for a practice and you don't have a relationship or any vested interest, and you see these two profiles, as soon as it starts to get confusing, it is way too easy to just remove yourself from that problem and go to an easier answer.
right.
And that's what most people are going to do. If there's a practice with good reviews and a high level and a good first impression, I'm not going to bother with this one. That's their problem, not mine. I'm going to the easy
Yeah.
solution.
Well, and I
So,
guess if you're be putting the efforts for reviews, you want to siphon them to one profile anyway, so that way those numbers
yeah.
are as
Yeah,
possible.
if
That
you've
makes
got two practices with 50 reviews, it looks a little low. If you've got one practice with 100, it looks a lot
right.
better.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes
so
total
just
sense.
driving everything towards one, as far as having the doctor name, you can put that in the other practice. There's lots of things that you can do, and happy if anybody has specific questions, please reach out to us and we're happy to answer them. But yeah,
Yeah,
for ease of use, make it as simple as possible for people to skip through that customer buyer journey, the awareness that a problem exists, researching solutions, considering those options and which one they're going to pick. Then they make the decision to buy and then they talk about it, advocacy. We want to
amazing.
make it as simple as possible to work through that and limit all the pitfalls where they can potentially get out of that process for you.
I love it. Well, as always, Corey, thank you so much. We so appreciate your expertise on these topics. And it just goes to show that we all know what Google Business Profile is. We may not have one for our own business, or we may not know all the different intricacies of it, but it just goes to show that we all as a consumer know its impact on us, right? So we
Yeah.
can use that to relate to how we are going to represent our businesses. You know, for this case, it's for endodontic practices and how patients find you. And sometimes it can be really hard to say, well, I don't know what I want to put on there. And then if you immediately think, well, I'm a consumer, I know what I expect of reviews. I know what I expect of Google Business Profiles. It definitely changes it. So I so appreciate you bringing that perspective, because I definitely think when we're talking about customer journey, it's nice to be able to get out of our own head, as we
Yeah.
say, and be able to kind of perceive what our patients need and what's going to really help us stand out when they find us in
Well,
our Google.
that's a great exercise that you can use as a consumer because we're business owners, but we're also consumers, and it's a lot harder as a business owner to know what to put forward. But if you take a step back and just do a quick Google search of something that you're interested in, best restaurants near me, best restaurants, Austin, Texas, best golf course, hairdresser, mechanic, and see what you're drawn to. See how those review scores motivate or affect you on an emotional level on moving forward, whether you'd be willing to work with somebody or not. And
Right.
as you catch those things, look at your own profile and say, am I leaving areas of opportunity here for people to fall out?
That's a once you see it, you can't unsee it kind of thing, right?
Yep.
When you start getting in the marketing headspace, you're like, I like this website, but why do I like it? And the minute you can
Yeah.
figure out why you like it, yeah, that's a big tool that you can use for your advantage for
It probably
sure.
solves your problem really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, awesome. Thank
Thanks so
you so
much,
much
Meredith.
for your time. I really appreciate it.